Arizona Diamondbacks top prospects here on the call up. It's Friday, November 8th. You got me, Arm Layton, and Jack McMullen. This system, we were putting it off for a little bit throughout the back end of the season, and I just was not really that excited to write it up, I'll be honest. But after the draft especially, and then also with some of the performances of some players throughout this system, I became increasingly excited to write it up, and it actually became a much more fun system to break down and overall pretty solid. So some bats that I'm actually very pumped to talk about, couple intriguing arms, but it is definitely improved from where it was middle of the season, thanks to some performances, thanks to the draft, and thanks to just, I think, the development of some of their players.
No doubt. This is a team that I think it's going to be very quickly forgotten. They were the best offense in all of baseball this year at the major league level. Like, they scored more runs. Everybody played 162 games. They scored more runs than the New York Yankees. They scored more runs than the Los Angeles Dodgers. Like, they have done a really good job of hitting on their early picks, a la Corbin Carroll. Even guys like an Alec Thomas, I think, factor into that equation. That's a hit because he's a big leaguer and a decently productive one. They have done really well in the trade market. Gabby Moreno is their catcher of the future. And they've done a good job supplementing with free agents as well. So anything you get from the current farm as it stands right now is bonus. And it's not like it's a top 15 farm system in baseball. But there's some added bonus here. It's not like you have nothing coming up. Sorry, Angels. But it's one of those where I think you can really look at this as icing on the cake instead of the cake versus 25 other organizations. It is the cake, the farm system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're clearly leaning into what they do well, as you kind of laid out, which is identifying bats and trying to develop those bats a little bit more. And I think that's clearly been a strength compared to the pitching side of things, though, they have had some success stories there. And we're going to talk about a really unique success story when we get to Yilber Diaz. He's well inside the top 10. But, there's the draft. Again, I keep hammering that because they added 3 intriguing bats that, just when a system is kind of towards the bottom third of the league, you add that upside and 2 high school guys that I think are very intriguing. That really does kind of provide a little shot into that system. I do think that IFA guys have been, it's always hit or miss, but with the D-backs, like, their IFA taste seems to be skewing more towards like the limited upside to a degree. And I don't love that because they end up not really getting a lot out of these guys anyways, at least over the last few years. We're going to talk about a few of them where, like, I almost would rather them swing for the fences a little bit more, given that some of the switch hitting, more contact oriented guys aren't actually making the contact that they were hoping at points. So I'm interested to see if they change their IFA approach. But before we get into it, like, that was the one thing that kind of stands out to me. I think if there's one area where the D-backs seem to be a little bit deficient, it seems to be on the international free agent side of things, where I think they could definitely improve. And just a lot of the prospects that they end up bringing in on that IFA side just seem to be tweeners, where it's like, is it hit? Is it power? Are they going to play short? A lot of them don't even end up sticking it short. Like, it's these weird tweener profiles that they seem to be kind of just getting suckered into at points.
And what I will say is they're not gun shy when it comes to international free agency. They're going to spend a little bit when it comes to IFA. They're going to creep near 7 figures for an international free agent signing. They'll firmly be in 6 figures for a lot of guys. And like, those are typically the guys that come through, the guys that sign for $600,000 to $800,000. And, they're the ones that litter Hillsborough and Amarillo. Are they bona fide studs that are coming through and consensus top 100 prospects? No. You'd like to see them hit more. That's an identification thing, but you can't say that they're gun shy when it comes to spending on international free agency.
Absolutely. And again, I think there's a commonality with the types. So I wonder if on the scouting side internationally, if they start to maybe take a different approach, moving forward here. But we'll jump right into it. As always, you got the link in the episode description with all of the write-ups. And we'll start with an IFA guy that I actually do think was number 16. Like, I think you could really make the case. Honestly, as I hit record, I'm like, should he have been 15? But we'll make the case. We'll spend a little bit more time on him. And then, of course, Jack, walk us through each of the IFA, each of the guys outside of the top 15.
A lot of them are IFA.
In reverse alphabetical order.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, so I have nothing more to add on Christopher Torian, because I was going to say, hey, is this the number 16 guy in the system? I feel like the answer is yes. 2022 IFA signing. He was awesome. DSL a 153 WRC plus, complex in 23 a 125 WRC plus. He was not striking out. He was in full season ball for the first time this year in Visalia. The K rate stayed at 16%. It just seemed like the bat to ball production was lacking a little bit. He was getting bat on ball, but in terms of being like flat out better than the pitching that he was seeing, it wasn't working. Like, you see very minimal impact here. At the end of the day, he walks all the time. He doesn't really strike out. Do you have defensive questions about Torrent, or is it just lack of impact offensively that might limit him?
He throws weird. And like, it's a very weird arm action. It's not a weak arm, but it's a weird arm action that he kind of gets like some sink sometimes. It's inconsistent. So I think ultimately that's going to push him to second. But I do think that's a guy that could plug it short, plug it third. Like, he's got the defensive value of a utility guy, I think, better than just the classic, oh, he's stuck at second. It's not as much that. I think that the actions are actually pretty good. He makes some nasty plays, like glove work wise. He's definitely got some ability. And I think there's a guy that definitely could make the leap in there. It was truly that tweener side of things, though, where I think the great numbers at those levels, as you mentioned, were mostly because 5'8" guy, really patient, not going to see a lot of strikes compared to other guys. So he leveraged that and drew a lot of walks. But what happens when you get to AA, where guys are able to fill up the zone a little bit more and attack you, and your 90th percentile exit velocity is 99 miles per hour, and your average exit velocity is in the mid 80s. Like you said, he can get to those balls. The contact rates are fine, but if it's a ground ball or a soft line drive, you're not really getting much out of that. So I think there's a utility role here, and that's why I think he is going to play his way into the top 15 as we see him maybe tap into a little bit more power. But it's just hard to really see him provide enough impact to be an everyday guy, because there's not a lot of value, beyond that either. The glove is fine, the speed is fine, and nothing really jumps out.
Yeah. A couple of things don't really jump out with Jansel Luis either, who's the next name to watch. 18 years old. He's pretty good at the complex. K rate under 18%. He did hit 6 homers in 53 games at the complex. It's a 105 WRC plus. He got up to Visalia at the end of the year. He was not good in a limited sample in Visalia. This is a guy that, based on what I read, is not a plus defender at third base. So there's reliance on the bat, and the bat hasn't been wowing at even the DSL and the complex, and especially not when he got to Visalia.
Yeah, I will say at least that you can see the potential with the bat power wise a little bit more than some of these other IFA guys. And he puts it on the ground a little bit too much. And of course, there's going to be more pressure on the bat since the glove is not, extremely valuable at this point. But he does hit the ball pretty hard. And, we did see him flash that power this year. And you mentioned the production being slightly above average there at the complex, but definitely a younger guy, right? Turned 18 years old in January going into the season. So yeah. I think this is another player that has at least a little bit more to dream on there, especially with the impact. And, he'll run into some home runs that I think come off the bat a little bit different than a lot of the other guys that you see at the lower levels in this D-back system. But yeah, he definitely still has, a long ways to go until we can really figure out the profile. And, being a little bit shorter, you can't really move over to first. So there's pressure to really figure out third base as well.
Yeah. Next guy's Landon Sims. I'm sure a lot of you guys know his name. Landon Sims, I would have said in any other year would be the best reliever in college baseball in 2021, 56 and 30 at a 1.4 K to 100, walked 15. But that guy, Kevin Kopps, won the Golden Spikes in 2021. He made the move to the rotation in 2022, and he looked awesome. He looked like a top of the first round starting pitcher. 15 and 2/3. He K'd 27. He walked 2, and then he blew out. So Tommy John surgery. He works back as a heavily protected starter. It was like 13 starts, 24 innings or something like that. It was fine. But then this year was the important one where he went back to the bullpen and he shows off the fastball slider combo. He's a reliever, and I think a pretty good one in the big leagues.
Yeah, definitely. I think has that intrigue as a big league reliever. It's been surprising that the velo has not really come back for him totally. I think that's a big reason why he made the move to the bullpen. Remember, this was a guy that when he was even getting stretched out more in that starter's role, or even just when we saw him in 3-4 inning spurts, he was sitting 93, 94, sometimes even 95 in the 1 to 2 inning spurts throughout this season. Earlier on, it was a little bit, livelier, But then we saw just fluctuations, up, down, up, down, up, down. Some outings it was as low as 91, 92, and then other outings it was 93, 94, sometimes, grabbing 5. So that's the interesting thing. Like, I wonder if there's some other things going on in terms of like just arm. I'm not saying like injuries, but just arm discomfort or just consistency after the surgery. But regardless, he's extremely effective, even in the low 90s. That fastball just seems to have that like cut ride to it that even at 92, which is what he averaged over the course of the season, was very effective, big in zone whiff numbers. And then naturally he's going to have a good cutter off of that. And then naturally he's going to have a good slider off of that. So he's clearly a supinator. And I think there's no doubt about that. And being able to get that little bit more life with the cut ride at 92, then he's got that cutter with a little bit more of that horizontal at 89, and then the bigger slider at 83. I do think this could be a very effective reliever. If he can gain a tick or two, I think you could start to see him as more a high leverage guy. So I'm very interested to see how, with now a full off season off of that surgery as well, what it looks like, going into 2025.
I've got next to nothing on Adriel Radney. All I know is he's 17 years old and he signed for $1.85 million. I know that he's a tall kid that has obviously a lot of projection because he's already 6'3" at 17 years old, and he, has space to put more meat on the bones. He's an outfielder that was not that good in the DSL, a 619 OPS in 34 games, but he signed for a lot of money, and he's really young.
Yeah, signed for a lot of money, is really young. It's a chaotic swing that definitely needs to be refined. The lower half's pretty out of control, flies open. I think that's why he struggled. There's no doubting the tools, but I mean, it's hard to envision him, having success with the swing currently as is. So it's just kind of one of those wait and see things. Big ticket guy. So you got to be patient. Also, he was 16 years old at the start of the season. So, I don't want to pick apart the swing too much, but that does explain why he struggled to the degree that he did. Obviously, he got a lot of money for a reason. He's big, projectable, like you said, and there's the tools, and he's 17. So another guy that, let's see how he comes back off this offseason and gets ready after probably the first adversity he's probably faced in his young baseball career.
Back to the recognizable college names. Ivan Melendez. I said corner infielder. I don't think he's a third baseman at the major league level, but he's been playing a decent bit of third base. He set a then BB Corps record, had 32 homers. The slash line at Texas in 2022 is hilarious. At 387, 508, 863. That record stood for 1 year until Jack Caglione broke it in 23. And that record stood for 1 year until Charlie Condon broke it this past year. So I mean, we're experiencing a power surge in college baseball. Is it the baseballs? Is it the bats? Is it the players? Probably a combination of all three. Ivan Melendez is a master. He had 30 homers in his first pro minor league season, or in his first full pro season. He had 22 this past year, but he has to hit the ball out of the ballpark in order to provide value. It's very Nico Cavadas.
Yeah, I mean, and the challenge is, like you said, it's first base, so even more so needs to hit the ball hard, and he doesn't walk. He chases at a 33% clip, so he's going to strike out. If he's not hedging it with a walk, it's just really hard for me to see a big league role here consistently unless he makes that improvement. Yeah. And that's the struggle. And I think as he continues to face more challenging pitching, that chase and the whiff's only going to get worse and worse. So I've never been too bullish on Ivan Melendez. And I mean, it is nice to see him still hit those home runs, but I just don't really know what that role could look like if he's not walking and you don't have much defensive value.
Does it turn into Luken Baker? Like that's the worry. And Luken Baker hasn't solidified himself in the big leagues.
And he's, I think, a lot further ahead in terms of approach and bat to ball, even Luken Baker is. So that's kind of puts it in perspective, I think.
Yeah. Jack Hurley, he was really good at Virginia Tech. He didn't have swing and miss issues. He had traits that could probably forecast swing and miss issues in professional baseball. And unfortunately, those are true. WRC plus under 100 this year. K rate was in the high 20s. He needs to shore up the bat to ball to let the other tools play.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a trend with a lot of these guys in this system, I think. And I mean, he swings hard and he hits the ball hard when he connects. But I mean, he had an overall contact rate of 61%. He's tooled up though. So there's a guy where at least if he's not going to walk and he's going to strike out a lot, I can be a little bit more patient because it's like, okay, he's tooled up and there's other things that we can kind of dream on here. But he also chased north of 30%. So just having that, his swing is pretty erratic as well. That makes things difficult, but 22 years old, can stick in center and can really motor and, has flashed the ability to hit the ball hard, can be a little bit more patient with a guy like this, but definitely another guy that is probably a swing adjustment candidate. And that's kind of a theme through this system, to be honest. And I think the development side, with the D-backs seems to be a hurdle here with their hitters, even though they do develop, or I guess translate their draft picks into big leaguers. I do think some of that's scouting more than the actual ability to get guys right that don't have the right swing mechanics.
I can see it. 3 pitchers, then 2 more hitters to wrap the names to watch. Spencer Giesting, lefty that got up to Double-A. This was a guy that came up in a lot of queries when it came to who's been the best pitcher in minor league baseball through the first 2 months of the season. It was Spencer Giesting. He had a 1.5 ERA and a 180 batting average against in 10 starts in high A. Then he got to double. He was a little bit worse, but at the end of the day, 141 innings at a 3.3 ERA this year. He does not throw hard. He's 88 to 90, but it's a weird angle from a guy that's 6'4", and it's a fastball kind of sweeper combination from a weird angle that might be good enough to put him in the Blake Walston category of, hey, you can shuttle between Reno and Arizona.
100%. And it is kind of that same kind of profile where I think the fastball averaged 90.0 on the dot, but he does have a great feel for a cutter and a great feel for a curveball that he mixes in pretty evenly, and a slider and a sinker and a changeup. So it's that kitchen sink type of approach. But the command that he has of the curve and the cutter, I think is a big reason why he had the success that he had. But definitely a guy that if he's not spotting everything up, it can be bombs away. So it's that guy that maybe is that depth arm you plug in and just hope he executes.
Next 2 guys seem pretty fascinating, and it seems like both of them have the opportunity to possibly be top 10 prospects in this system at some point. Connor Foley, a right-hander out of Indiana, and Daniel Egan, a right-hander out of Presbyterian. I'll combine them both. Foley was former All-State tight end in high school. He's 6'5", 235. He looks like Adonis, and he will run it up to the high 90s with his heater, and it's a good heater. It's got, good carry, and it plays well. They give him second-round money. In the 5th round, I believe, is pick number 164. And then Egan, this guy was not good at Presbyterian his first 2 years. And then his fastball ticked up 5 miles an hour before his draft year. And he had a 2.67 and K'd 121 in 77 2/3 innings.
Yeah, I mean, definitely intriguing arms. And I think a fun scouting and development test here because they've got some tools and components, but how do you get these guys to maximize what they've got going on here? Like Foley, I think it was a 55% strike rate last year at Indiana. But also, as you mentioned, the characteristics on the fastball are great. The changeup is disgusting. It was not a matter of whether guys were able to hit it. I mean, if it was in the zone, it was probably a strike. His in-zone whiff numbers were crazy. Opponents hit below 100 against it. The challenge was he only landed at first strike 53% of the time. So good project, though. And I think when you see what he was able to do in terms of the underlying whiff and the pitch characteristic side of things, I definitely think that's a fun shot to take. And then with Egan, I think it's kind of, in that same conversation of, what do you got here? 6'4", 200 pounds. You talked about how he, really settled in this past season. He's got 2 banger breaking balls. So I think the fastball doesn't have as much life as a Foley, but I think 93, 94 with 2 banger breaking balls, there's a lot to like there as well. And he's even flashed a change. So I'm just interested to see what it looks like professionally. We're kind of waiting on the debut of both of those guys.
Yeah, 2 more bats to wrap up the names to watch. Christian Cerda, younger brother of Alan Cerda, who lives in call-up lore, and I think just baseball media lore in general. But 21 years old, got to Double-A Amarillo as a catcher. He walks as much as any young catcher in minor league baseball. It's him and Harry Ford. The plate discipline's awesome. Everything else seems to be lagging behind the plate discipline. It's awesome if you walk, but as you climb levels – guys are going to start challenging you in the strike zone, and I don't feel like he's proven enough to show that he's a top 15 caliber prospect.
Yeah, and I think that puts more pressure on the defense. If he wants to, I think maybe profiling is that backup, but the defense is fringe to average there. So if he can develop more as a defender, that could help. But I think, the patience walking is huge, but there's not a ton of power at this point either. So it's a weird, too much swing and miss, not enough power. It's going to be hard to produce other than walking. And I think that's kind of the limitation here with Cerda.
The last guy in a fascinating one is Pedro Catoy, who's an outfielder, was supposed to be at the complex this year, but he missed the entire year with injury. $200,000 IFA guy out of Panama, was awesome in the Dominican Republic in 2023. 288, 361, 441 slash, 18 for 20 in the stolen base department in 48 games. It seemed like he played a decent enough center field, although I didn't see any video. That's just what I was reading. But he's interesting. Like the 2023 DSL sample was enough to put him on this list, even though he missed the entirety of this season.
No doubt, he's super skinny too. So I think you can definitely dream on some more strength, given that he's 6'1", and still just 18 years old. Gets the bat to the ball pretty consistently. He talked about the speed and potential defense in center field. Very, very, very light on the impact. So I think there's a big importance on adding that strength and not having that compromise to speed. But he's definitely a kind of slap the ball around the yard speedster type of guy that could provide some value as a fourth outfielder type, but also has a lot of time to try to tap into more upside than that.
Love it.
We'll get into the top 15 here, which starts with Cristian Mena. Before that, quick break. All right. Cristian Mena, right-handed pitcher who actually made it up to the big leagues for a quick cameo. Originally a Chicago White Sox signee. They signed him for $250,000 in 2019. Traded him over in a swap for Dom Fletcher. It was an interesting move in general. I thought it was actually a good one for the D-backs, considering the system was light. Take a shot on a kid here that's still surprisingly only 21 years old. It feels like he's way older than that. It's definitely a prospect fatigue candidate. But Mena, I think it continues to be the same conversation that I think we had about him when we talked about the trade at the time and the White Sox system before. It might be one of the worst performing fastballs in minor league. That said, the slider is elite. I like it, minor league speaking, like prospects, it's borderline plus. The curveball is above average. If he commanded it a little bit better, I think he could play a plus, but it flashes that. But you have those two breaking balls that are big league pitches. But you also have a fastball that this year, this is a real stat. And I understand that he was thrown in the PCL, but even last year, I can pull those numbers up. It's not as bad, but it's not good. I'll throw a four-seamer and a sinker. The sinker is just a dead zone fastball, essentially. Opponents against those two fastballs, which he also struggles to command, only landed him for a strike at a 56% clip, hit 463 with a 1376 OPS and 10 home runs. You just can't succeed that way. It's not really possible. The flip side, though, is his curveball and slider, opponents hit a combined 170 against. And those pitches he throws just as much as his fastball. And that's why he doesn't have the worst numbers in the world.
Right.
But I mean, I just don't get it. The fastball is 93. It's not like he's throwing 88, but the shape, it just seems like it is. The four-seamer is as stock as it comes, and then the sinker is just dead zone.
So I ask you, what's the remedy? Is it learning a cutter? His hand moves like that. It's clear that his wrist can turn like that, and maybe it's just try a cutter.
Anything, man. I agree. I think trying a cutter or just trying any other different kind. You don't want to change the release point because obviously the breaking balls are great and he actually commands them decently well overall. But there's got to be some sort of change here because it's just not going to work. Again, going into the more pitcher-friendly environments that he threw in 2023, opponents hit 328, 436, 593 against his fastball. It's 1,029 OPS. So it's not going to work. So I really think that the solution is have him he's going to be a reliever, I think. And he's going to be one of those types where we just watched Tommy Kahnle throw 50 changeups in a row. Maybe Cristian Mena is a guy that just throws 80% curveball slider. He did land the slider for a strike at a 68% clip. And it's this unique shape where it's a riding slider where it still has the horizontal, but it stays up. And because it's such a unique shape, on a scatter plot, it's by itself. Hitters just seem to have weird reactions to it. Go slider heavy, mix in the curveball, and then that fastball can just be that change of pace if he's not able to kind of find a different shape for it.
So I'm thinking about Matt Whistler, who a couple years in Tampa was throwing 90% slider. And, like that, I think is the best example of a guy that does not have a fastball succeeding at the major league level. I'm not saying that he's going to be 90% one pitch, but if he's 50% slider, 30% curveball, 20% fastball, like
Yeah.
that could be the recipe to
And it
success.
feels
And
like,
it's not a starter. It
no,
cannot be a
can't
starter.
be. It can't be. I totally agree. And I think that's why this is the kind of guy where he goes to like a Tampa and they just say, just throw this all the freaking time
Yeah.
and then it works. But maybe the
Or
Diamondbacks will do that.
Or he goes to Boston and they're like, "Oh, kick your fastball to the curb. Let's figure out something else."
Exactly. So we'll see what happens and how they handle him. But those breaking balls should get him a major league role if they can, figure out the pitch distribution well enough.
Yeah.
Another kind of fringy big league arm, but a guy that I think has a better chance of starting is Yu-Min Lin. And Lin is, I think, one of the wider ranging prospects in terms of where you see some rank him. But I think, after this year, it was somewhat understood that the stuff is probably not going to be ample enough to consistently be in a rotation anywhere higher than maybe a 5 spot. Another guy where the fastball is probably a bit of a problem. It's 90 to 92. And there's nothing really unique about it shape-wise. It mostly plays up because of the release side of things, where it's just a little bit crossfire and a little bit funky. His best pitch is his changeup. It's a plus changeup. And he dominated through the lower levels. But we always talk about it. The changeup guys that can throw strikes, those guys tend to dominate at the lower levels. And then if they don't really have much other than that, you see it catch up to them later on. He doesn't have much else other than that. The curveball, I think, flashes above average. That helps. But other than that, it's a slider that plays all right against righties, a cutter that's and then the 2 fastballs. So I see kind of a 6-7 starter type, like a depth arm that, comes up and ends up eating 50, 60 innings for you whenever you need. Could be a long man type, unless he makes a leap command-wise, where like he throws enough strikes, but he doesn't really command the secondaries as well as he should. I think it was a 63% strike rate this year. It's hard to envision him sticking as a 5.
He also doesn't embody durability when you look at him. I mean, he's a small dude, like 5'11", 160. I know they take those measurables when he signed in IFA, but
I don't think he's much bigger than that.
They haven't changed much. And it's
No.
like it's hard to get, even 90 to 92 out of a 160-pound frame. And he efforts his way to 90 to 92. Like, it's a lot of lower half. It's a lot of driving down on the mound. And you
crouches down before he even gets into his mechanics.
Yeah, and I know that, that is like a point A to point B thing that, is present in some arms. But at the end of the day, like, it just seems so high effort, and he's ringing the towel drive everything it's worth on every pitch. And that, doesn't scream, hey, I'm going to give you 170 innings.
Exactly. So I think maybe long man, possible depth arm. That's probably the most likely scenario here with a Yu-Min Lin.
Yeah.
13, Alberto Barriga, a guy that I know, the D-backs are excited about. Like, this is a dude that's really interesting, very unique profile. A 5'8", 155-pound catcher. And another guy that he is what he's listed at. He looks like a middle infielder playing catcher. And I say that in a good way. He could be a plus defender back there. He moves well. And I know, generally you like to see bigger targets, bigger guys back there, but he moves so well that he's able to stay in front of stuff. That's probably the one thing, though, is like, can the blocking continue to come along? But I mean, I'm watching him throw guys out. Like, if they're trying to steal third, he's almost dropping down like he's turning 2 and ripping it over there. He'll get up real quick and snap throw over to second base. Like, this is a guy that's definitely going to be able to limit the run game really well, has a great arm for his size. Bat to ball is pretty good. Like, the barrel accuracy is impressive. My concern with him offensively is that there's not a ton of bat speed. So the bat to ball is good, but the contact rates won't be as good as maybe the hand-eye coordination would imply, because sometimes you just get sped up. But I think this guy is a high probability backup catcher and a solid one. And I couldn't help but think of Jose Trevino. Like, that is exactly what he looks like to me. And I think you could maybe dream on a little bit more offensively. And you know how it is with catchers. They kind of catch lightning in a bottle offensively, and all of a sudden they spit out a 3-win season like Jose Trevino did the one year, like, because the defense is so good. I could see that happening with a Barriga, but most likely it's what we're seeing from Trevino now, which is a really solid backup catcher that could nestle his way into a starter role for a second division team, later on in his career. But I do think this is a solid catcher.
I had never heard this name before. So like I did a little bit of a dive where I was like, does this make more sense over a Cristian Mena? Because you were probably weighing that. It's right.
Yes.
Who has a higher likelihood of being a backup catcher in the big leagues? And you sided with Barriga, and that pitch makes sense.
Yeah, so I can see a plus glove there. And if he's a plus glove and he has the ability to put the ball in play, that's already better. So I think, and not that Serra doesn't have the ability to put the ball in play, but not to the degree that Barriga does. And I think that's something that, really does help him. If you make average contact and also he's a good athlete, like he'll probably steal 10 bags and play plus defense back there. I'm going to side with that.
Quick aside. It's so funny how low the bar is for backup catching in Major League Baseball right now.
Yes.
Like it's a comically low bar. We just saw Austin Hedges sign another big league deal to be a backup catcher. Another.
That's the makeup side of things too, right? And that's where and Barriga earns really high marks on that. I'm so glad you brought that up. I forgot about that. He earns really high marks on that front too. So when a player like that checks all the boxes of the profile, even if it's not a exciting profile, and we always talk about floor ceiling, feels so confident in the floor here, and that's why I think he's a top 15 guy.
Yeah.
Number 12, another high floor, and a guy that I've always liked. It was a rough year for him, relatively speaking. He still produced league average numbers. Jorge Barrosa, outfielder, switch hitter, absolutely flies. Great. I would say actually didn't fly as much this year as he battled some injuries. So absolutely goes and gets it though out there in center field. He's a plus defender out there. Can play all three spots very well. Good field to hit, fine approach, gap to gap. I think screams fourth outfielder. Another guy that could probably be a second division regular if the bat continues to come along. Didn't have the year that I think we were hoping, but again, I think the injuries held him back at points. Diamondbacks needed somebody to plug in the outfield a couple times. He came up there and plugged in, didn't hit great, but again, provided the defensive value. He's a guy that's not afraid to go on the base paths either. I think he can steal 20 bags. He can play plus defense in the outfield. And then it just comes down to, is he a 85 WRC plus guy or is he a 105 WRC plus guy? If he's a 105 WRC plus guy, he's a second division regular. But I think regardless, very, very high probability fourth outfielder and a guy that if you have to throw him in there more consistently, you're not going to feel like you have a huge drop off from whoever was playing there more regularly.
They're going to keep spawning these guys. Like I think Arizona should just start trading these guys like Dominic Fletcher. It's like, more because you're going to get one of these guys every single year. Barrosa is a subdued version of Jake McCarthy and Alec Thomas, and Carroll's the best of them. But like they always have so many outfield options that it's like you could play center, you could play a really good corner, and you're going to figure out a way to hit enough to stay in our lineup. Like, keep them and the Brewers, keep, delivering, keep outsourcing your fourth outfielders.
Well, and they do well on those archetypes. They don't do well on the power and whiff risk archetype. So I wonder if they're just going to start to stray away from there. And they kind of did in this draft. We're going to talk about Waldschmidt and Slade Caldwell, another guy that checks that box of that archetype. Yeah. I wonder if they just should start leaning into that more instead of trying to balance out the system with, okay, we've got these speedsters and defense guys. We need to add more power. Sure. But like you haven't hit on those players. So that's the interesting wrinkle in it. Last thing on Barrosa, does hit the ball a little bit harder than I think people would expect. It's his exit velocities obviously are not going to be league average, but they're not going to be at the bottom. I think he's a guy that could be, in the 30th, 35th, maybe a little bit higher than that percentile, which with his skill set and who he is, like that's more than enough. So I am really excited to see how he does this year because I think he's a bounce back candidate going into 2025.
Love it.
Number 11 is a guy I don't have a ton on, but I am excited about the upside here is JD Dix. He would have been the third selection for them, right? Because he was the PPI, Waldschmidt was the PPI pick. JD Dix was
competitive balance. Yeah.
So he was the third selection there. Dix is interesting, an under scouted area in Wisconsin, obviously, but just performed there, stood out at points in the summer circuit. And it was enough for the D-backs to say, hey, we'll take you at 35. It was 500,000 under slot, but it was still $2.15 million. So clearly, came with a lot of intrigue there. It's a guy that does have the tools to potentially stick at shortstop. If he can't, then, could play third, could play second, could be kind of a roving guy. Obviously, that would put more pressure on the bat. I think it's hit over power. There's one of those players that's difficult at this stage, right? He's 6'2", 185, has some room to add more strength. So could be power over hit depending on how he develops. But when I look at his swing path and everything, it seems like hit over power. It's kind of a simple operation. A little bit too much barrel movement right before he gets to a slot. Those are all things that I think that'll get cleaned up. But it's a path that allows him to drive the ball to all fields from both sides. Pretty repeatable from both sides of the plate. If he can stick it short, that helps his profile a ton. But I think there's a chance for average hit and power here. He's got good plate discipline. That stood out to me in what I was able to see. So also an above average runner. I think it is really helpful if he sticks it short. And I think if the goal is for him to stick it short, then he's probably not going to be adding that power. If the glove looks like he can't stick it short, okay, lean into, machoing up a little bit, and maybe that average hit can turn into also above average power. So there's a few different ways this thing can go, and it's just kind of one of those wait and see, but you can see the template there and a solid baseline of just natural talent here.
I've got nothing to add on JD Dix, the player. I will say is a new Wisconsinite. The Milwaukee suburbs are having a moment. JD Dix from Whitefish Bay, which is just a little bit north of Milwaukee. Just west of Milwaukee is Wauwatosa, and Wisconsin Lutheran High School is there. So Dix was just taken as the 35th pick by Arizona. Eddie Reinders was taken out of Wisconsin Lutheran by the Pirates. And then Duke's leading scorer this year, I'm sure, Con Knippel, this freshman. Have you heard that name before? He's going to outscore Cooper Flagg. He's also
no way.
Yeah, he's a Milwaukee suburbs guy. So the Milwaukee suburbs are having a moment right now with Dix, Knippel, and Reinders.
I think there was one other recent MLB draft example too of someone from that area, but I'm not gonna. There's no way.
I know Lux is from there.
Yeah, I think it was Lux is the most recent. So it's not that recent actually.
Not that recent, but yeah, shout out Milwaukee.
Yep. Getting into the top 10. Druw Jones is number 10. Number 2 overall pick in 2023. The defense is not a question. Will never be a question. Actually, it'll be the answer most of the time. But everything else is pretty much the question. He turned in a much better year than I would have expected, which prompted me to watch every single at bat. And I did, because I was bothering you on a night where I know your focus was elsewhere, as most of America was.
Yeah.
I legitimately combed through everything. I just wanted to understand how he produced. What was it, a 125 WRC plus?
Yeah, probably a better use of your time, to be honest.
I mean, it was what it wasn't. Like, it was that much time for the number 10 prospect. And I watch as much as I can on everybody, but like, I'm not normally going to like that. I usually save the every AB thing, or at least every AB that I can see in the second half.
Yeah.
For, the top guys. And I'm trying to split hairs, but I just wanted to figure this thing out. The mechanics didn't really get any better. He started his operation a little bit earlier, and his hand-eye coordination's good, man. And that's what he survives on. He survives on athleticism and hand-eye coordination. That swing will not play. I don't enjoy saying it. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he proves me wrong, and there's a new wave of people swinging like Druw Jones, and it works. But I'd stake my credibility on until he makes a swing change. I can't see how this works. And the best comparison I can give here is like, he swings like he has rollerblades on, where it's just either kicking out either way. He starts wide, but then, or like somewhat wide, but doesn't get into his legs. Instead, he kind of, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it, like, is on the inside parts of his feet. So he's upright, but kind of wide, which means your weight, if you try to stand here, if you're listening or you're walking right now or whatever, like, stand up, put your feet relatively wide beyond your shoulders, and then keep your legs relatively straight. All of your weight is kind of stuck in the middle, right? So then when you go to load back, you're going to teeter over your back leg, right? You feel yourself go up.
Well, and your shoulders are almost moving at this point.
And because most guys, they're sinking or they're coiling or whatever.
Right, because don't you want your shoulders level the entire time? Like, that's the goal.
Yeah, and you want your head not to move is you want your head to move as little as possible. So he's wide. His weight is in his inner knees, and then he's rocking back and rocking forward. So you have this crazy push back and forth, and there's no strength behind it either because you're not even getting into your lower half. The craziest part is he's surviving like that. So my thing is like, there's clear strength here. He's 6'4", 195. He has room for more. He's a freakazoid athlete, no doubt about that. If he can actually use the ground and really have his body working the way it can, he could be that number 2 overall pick looking guy. But like, the swing has not changed now for so many ABs. He has also battled some injury issues. And then I think like the final nail in the coffin for me when like in terms of just labeling the 30 hit tool here was on top of that teetering, he also steps in the bucket. Like, and I know that's something that they've been working on, but he still does it all the time where he teeters back and forth and then his foot lands towards third base. So he's totally flying open. And I think some of that is because when your weight's pushing forward, and I think that was the bad habit first, like the weight was pushing forward, barrel drags behind you. The first thing you're thinking is, oh man, the barrel's still way behind me. I got to get this front side out. So the more you try to feel like you got to get that front side out, the more he started to probably feel that with his foot plant and started to just land a little bit more open, a little bit more open, a little bit more open. And now he's at a point where he's frequently stepping in the bucket. If you look at his spray charts, I don't think he pulled a ball in the air within like 15 feet of the foul line. So like it's just from that lens, I just don't see how it's possible to succeed. I think a big reason why he had the numbers he had, he's super patient, like 17% chase rate, and just was waiting for pitches he could hit. But I mean, this is a dude that had, I mean, I'm looking at it now in terms of extra base hits. He had a couple in the left center gap, but he did not have a single extra base hit in the air to straightaway left or left of that.
You play a lot of games. That's hard to believe with how many games that you play in a season. Like, you should be able to just mistake your way into that.
But you can't when you're pushing forward and you're stepping in the bucket and the barrel's totally dragging. So
I feel like he can't look at the OPS and he can't look at the WRC plus and say, this was a good year for me. Like, you have to, somebody needs to tell him that. Somebody needs to tell him that, like, he pulled 0 baseballs in the air to left field.
I mean, yeah, his air pull rate was 8%. Average is 23%. And mind you, I went through every single air pull. They were almost all just bloops or like kind of ass out, pop-ups that he reached out on. I agree. Like somebody's got to like get through to him to make the adjustment because he's so freaking talented. It's a 70 glove in center. He's a 70 runner. And the fact that he's surviving is a testament to how incredibly talented. I think if 95% of minor league hitters had to swing the way that he does, they would have hit below 200. Like, I really do believe that. So that's why I don't want to give up on him. But like, he's a swing adjust. And here's the other thing: like, he's one adjustment away from being at least Jacob Young. Mm-hmm. And then he's, a couple adjustments away from still being that guy that can be a really good baseball player. But if he's 35 hit tool and can grow into, fringy power and be the 70 runner and 70 defender, like, he's still going to be a big leaguer. Yep. But it's just, I can guarantee you that there is not a single player with swing mechanics, anything like Druw Jones is, that's in the top 10 in any system that we write up or do anything on. So I'm rooting for him. I really want to see him be great. And I hate like just picking it apart, but like, it's almost frustrating to me because he's so good, like in terms of the natural ability.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think everybody does need to realize that he is about to turn 21 years old. Like, he turns 21 at the end of this month. So, a guy like that, a guy with that pedigree, a guy with that dad, frankly, should be, flying through the minor leagues because he's been set up for success in professional baseball since he told his dad that he wanted to be a professional athlete.
Yep.
So like, I don't know. It's just tough because somebody with these credentials that Druw Jones has should probably be in Double-A by now.
Oh
and
yeah,
like be succeeding in AA by now.
absolutely. And again, the pathing, 58% ground ball rate too. So it's just it's too hard to succeed that way. So hopefully this offseason we see him come back. If he has a swing change, I'll start to really get excited if it's looking like it's helping him achieve the things that he wants to achieve in the box. Number 9 is a guy that has very simple swing and it works well for him, but I think he would kill for Druw Jones's tools.
Right.
Gino Groover, infielder, second round pick in 2023, was hurt for a little bit of the year. We've talked about him plenty on the pod because of the AFL. I mean, the floor is so high here because I think at the very least he's a platoon. He crushes lefties, infielder that can play third and second base. I struggle to see the consistent big league regular role because the hit tool is average, the approach is plus, which I think conflates with the hit tool, and people will say, oh, well, the hit tool is plus. I think the bat to ball is big league average, which is still good. And then it's accentuated by elite plate discipline and swing decisions. I want to see some more power. That would be great, because it's 35 present, but he's a physical dude. Like he has the potential to grow into some more power. I think maybe he can find a little bit more violence and bat speed in his swing. Like that, this is a classic guy that Red Sox bat speed program, something like that. And it's not just the Red Sox, right? But just something like that, where it's if he gains 2 ticks and his top end exit velocity, this is a perfect example, by the way, of why we use 90th sometimes. Is Gino Groover, his floor is so high batted ball wise, where he finds the barrel when he's making contact. His average exit velocity is 88 miles per hour. That's more than fine.
Yeah.
The problem is his 90th is 101, and his max that we've seen from him, I think, is 107.
Huh.
We got a 108. For a guy that's going to probably be playing third and maybe an offensive oriented second base, got to see a little bit more than that. If his, top ends are more 111, it's going to allow him to split the gaps more. It's going to allow him to get closer to 15 homers. And if he does that, then this guy could definitely be an average regular. I think a big question will be, how does the glove come along? He's worked hard on, I think, the footwork. The glove looks good in terms of his hands. The arm action's a little funky, and he sails them a lot. So that's why I think he's second baseman that can plug in at third. And, then I think you could maybe see that everyday role there. It's interesting.
The good news is the hit and plate discipline combination is enough to have you encouraged that he's going to get to the big leagues. It's just in what capacity are you going to be a big leaguer? Because he's hit at every stop. In college baseball, he was a 349 hitter. In 88 minor league games, he's a 281 hitter. And in the fall league right now, I mean, this guy has 20 hits in 15 games. He's hitting 370 because he's just better than all these pitchers. And, this is a guy that probably falls into the bucket of league average when it comes to AFL experience, because he played 13 games in Amarillo this year. For the most part, he was a high A guy. I would probably equate the AFL level to the high A level, something in between high A and double, but probably high A.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're talking about a guy that is seeing comparable competition and killing it right now, frankly, in the ways that he has. So in essence, what you're asking for is something new from Gino Groover.
Yeah.
And he hit 13 bombs at NC State in his draft year. It's metal and it's college pitching. Don't lean too far into that. But yeah, that would be good. I think it would be fun if you could kind of pick and choose who goes to Driveline or goes through the Red Sox bat speed program.
Yeah, exactly.
He is totally let's keep the characteristics, let's keep your personality in your swing. Let's just make it a little angrier.
Yep, exactly. And what I love about the floor is, he demolishes lefties. So I could see that short platoon infield type at the worst. Hit 330 against lefties this year, including what he's done already in the fall league, and has historically crushed lefties. So that part is nice and helps see if he can stay healthy. But I think this is still just a very high floor guy. And he's shown the ability to pull the ball in the air. So it could be a little bit of that, I think I even put it in the write-up, the Justin Henry Malloy, outslug the EVs, pull the ball in the air. So that could be a component, that helps him too. Cause he did sneak out 10 home runs. And, I think a lot of that was the ability to crush hangers in the air and things like that.
Could see it.
Number 8, Ryan Waldschmidt. This was their PPI pick at 31.
Yep.
Out of Kentucky, originally was Charleston Southern.
I think so.
Very interesting player. He was off to a crazy start on the Cape before he tore his ACL, then somehow came back, I think, in the quickest turnaround from a torn ACL I've ever seen, to be able to get back for the start of the season in 2024 at Kentucky. One of those weird situations where he's a great athlete and a horrible defender. It was an adventure. He started in the infield at Charleston Southern, and they moved him in different spots. And then by the time he got to Kentucky, it was stash him in left and just hope. He has the closing speed to compensate for it, but it's an adventure out there from a reads and routes perspective. It's all about the bat, though. And it's a guy that has elite plate discipline already for his age and level. Has flashed above average power. I just think swing path wise and just the way that he kind of approaches the baseball, it's probably more 20 home runs than, dreaming on 25 to 30, but then also has at least average, if not slightly better bat to ball skills. I think the swing's a little bit uphill. So I think it evens out an average hit tool. But if you have average hit plus plate discipline plus average game power, and you're an above average runner, if he's just a passable defender in left, that's a big league regular. And another guy that I do think, could crush lefties. So I'm just interested to see how the defense progresses. And then also is he going to make a leap in the power or hit department, or is it going to are they going to kind of just work together? He's averaging both. The plus plate discipline pushes him across, and the speed helps as well.
He had a phenomenal college season. Kentucky as a whole had a phenomenal college season, and I feel like he was one of those guys that benefited from team success a little bit in the draft, because I know that you mentioned this is a guy that's getting a lot of middle of the first round buzz. He ended up not going in the first round, but PPI is effectively end of the first round. It was him and Emilian Petrie, who was, I want to say, a second round pick. They were the two beneficiaries of Kentucky's really strong season. And he was, one of the best players on one of the best teams in college baseball. It's clear that he has some intangibles going his way. So, I think that's kind of where the plate discipline stands out. And frankly, it's kind of impressive that he walked 15 times in 14 games to start his pro career, because a lot of these guys will jump in and be like, okay, let me swing and show people that college baseball is at a spot where we can be a rocket ship through the minor leagues. The fact that he was willing to take his walks was very, very impressive. And I don't know if it was him or he just ran into a lot of guys that were really tired at the end of the year that,
hey, but you got to wait him out.
You got to wait him out. So I think that's a very mature thing to hop into pro ball and walk 15 times in his first 14 games.
I mean, if you're going 20-20, because he can steal bags, if he's 20-20 and, hits 260 with a great OBP, that's a regular. It's just depending on how catastrophic it is in corner outfield. So I think that's a big thing to watch here. But he's a good athlete. So, maybe he gets the work in through the offseason and something can come along there defensively.
Yeah.
Next is Adrian Del Castillo, who had a nice big league debut. We'll break down what worked for him in a moment. One more quick break. Del Castillo was a difficult player to, I think, grade out in terms of the future value. I texted you about him when we were going through this, because the defense is not great. It's come along to the point where there were people out there, a lot of scouts that said he's never even going to catch professionally after the lower levels. They'll bang that, and he's come along enough receiving, blocking wise to, I think, be passable there. But the arm is well below average, and that really does hold him back. And he still has some components of the blocking side, and I think could be a little bit better. That said, he plugged in for the D-backs, and a big reason why he was successful was the bat. And this was a breakout offensive year for him. Big reason why he was a top prospect in the draft, even though it was a disappointing draft year for him out of Miami, was the bat. But it just hadn't come together for him professionally until this year. And you could say, oh, well, the PCL, and sure, but the EVs, the batted ball profile, the swing mechanics, everything backs it up. This is a guy that's going to hit. I think the average may be in the 240 range, but he'll walk enough. And I do think that this is a guy that can hit 25 home runs if you give him enough at-bats. Just what does everything else look like? The challenge is it's DH/catcher, because I don't really know if there's much of a fallback at first with his size and everything. They've tried him in the corner outfields at points through college and in the early parts of his pro career where he might just kind of be a stash guy there. But I think he proved even in his pro debut that this is a big league bat. I'm trying to figure out how. Is it a big league bat that you have backing up a catcher that's really good defensively. Might work that way because Moreno is so good defensively, but generally you want your backup catchers to be defensively oriented. So that's the limitation here. So either the bat, I think, has to continue to really translate and he gets an opportunity somewhere else, or, the glove comes along a little bit more, but with it being an arm strength issue, I'm not sure that that'll happen. But again, this is a guy that you give him enough run, I think he's going to hit you 25 home runs. It's just, where is he playing? And if he's DHing, then he's got to really mash for you.
It's just fascinating to me that he's played what? He's played 2 innings of left field in his professional career, and that's it. So all but 2 innings of his professional career have been behind the dish. When he played 6 games in right in Miami, at Miami in his draft year. So Arizona has never tried him in another position, which is bizarre to me because even an MJ Melendez was getting tried by Kansas City in the minor leagues at other positions, and now you see him scrapping catching entirely, and he's a corner outfielder for them. So why can't they just try him in spring training in a corner outfield or, at first base? I don't know what Arizona's first base plan is now. It doesn't seem to be Christian Walker. So, there's an opportunity here to experiment. And I'm kind of shocked that they haven't done it before.
Yeah, I don't know if they think he's too short for it, but man, I think he can be fine there, not a Ty France type of situation. Yeah. The bat was too good in both AAA and in the big leagues even to, I think, not try some different things defensively. And especially if they end up moving off of one of their outfielders, keep trying him out there as a platoon guy. I definitely think this is a fun bat. It could be trade bait for them too, though, because there could be some teams out there that, are willing to be patient with him as a catcher, where again, he's not a total liability now with how he's come along.
And hey, maybe the Diamondbacks are willing to be patient with him as a catcher. Maybe they're fine just kind of stomaching that. And it's Gary Sanchez is still getting $12 million a year. Why can't Adrian Del Castillo spend 2 more years of pre-arb trying to figure it out behind a world-class defender in Moreno?
Exactly. So that's another player where I'm very interested to see what the Diamondbacks approach and perspective is with him, but he clearly elevated himself throughout this organization with what he did this year, both in AAA and at the big league level when he was thrown into the fire.
Yeah.
Number 6, Yilber Diaz. He also got thrown into an opportunity at the big league level. And I thought he showed some good things through spurts, but also this was a guy that was not really on any radars, considering that he signed for $10,000 in 2021. One of my favorite stories, quick spark notes of it, is essentially he hung the cleats up after he wasn't signed in the 2019 IFA cycle or 2018 IFA cycle.
Yeah.
And left Venezuela. So that's where he's from, left. And I believe he was in Peru, washing cars. And somebody there said, hey, you look like an athlete. You got big hands, whatever. Have you considered playing ball or whatever? Gets kind of persuaded into working out again, starting to do it. Liked what he was starting to see results-wise, goes back to Venezuela, starts playing ball. And long story short, he gets scouted, gets the opportunity, and gets flown out by the D-backs for a workout because one scout that saw him was very adamant that they should give him a shot. So he's flown out to the DR, to their complex there, and then peak COVID hits where they shut down the airports. So he's stuck there. D-backs aren't just going to push that kid out on the streets. Right. So he's able to stay at the complex. It feels like divine intervention. And he works out there that whole time. Any other circumstance that's not even legal. But obviously, MLB is not going to be like, no, get that kid out of there. Right. So it worked out there. And by the time, I think a few months passed, he's getting to the mid-90s instead of the low 90s. And I don't know how the legal loopholes, how they were able to, once the world got back to normal, to sign him, because obviously there's rules against that, but I'm sure that they were able to probably work out an exception. I don't know, but they were able to work around those parameters. They signed him for $10,000. He ends up getting the yips, which is also crazy. Works through that. And I know, Jack, you probably pulled up the story, so we can credit the right people there. If not, I can pull it up once I kick it back over to you. But just a remarkable story. Anyways, now he sits sits mid 90s, touches upper 90s, and has a disgusting slider. He has a pretty good curveball as well. I think velocity-wise, it implies a plus heater, but unfortunately, the shape is not great. The extension's not great. So at 97, it plays a lot better. I see a high-leverage reliever at the best case scenario in terms of like, I think his best impact. But I also see a guy that could be a 5 and dive starter in the back of a rotation because the fastball slider combination is so good. He'd need that curveball command to come along. It's a big league average curveball, just isn't commanded enough because it's so depthy. But when he's in short spurts, 1 to 2 innings, he's 97 to 99. And I think that's where he could be weaponized as this multi-inning reliever, could be high leverage, Swiss Army knife that I think is a very valuable arm.
Well, I think it was Jesse Friedman on PHNX. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this is a great story. Title of it is Bigger Than Baseball, Inside Yilber Diaz's Remarkable Journey to the Show, published in mid-July of this year. In terms of him on the mound, there are very few people as athletic as Yilber Diaz on the mound that show their athleticism in that way. Like, I mean, you could tell that this guy was an athlete first, pitcher second, and figured out how to refine his pitching approach here. And I mean, it's a weird angle because it's like very over the top, but he gets tilt with his torso to the point where like he can almost reach directly high in the sky. And I mean, dude, like he gets the most out of his legs that he possibly can. It's a very impressive delivery. Like, am I a little worried about it when he's 32 years old? Maybe, but I mean, he's in his mid-20s right now, and he looks like a freak athlete there.
And that's why I love him in the relief role because it is high effort, like you said. And they had him in relief, or he started one game. No, I think he came in long relief actually. And at the end of the year, he made 3 appearances. He went 4 innings and long relief and tossed 71 pitches and was really effective. Only allowed 2 earned runs against the Brewers. But then the final 2 appearances for him, an inning and 2/3 and 2 2/3 innings. So those are still pretty decent sized outings. He averaged 97 with the fastball there. So if he's going 1 inning spurts, I think he could be sitting upper 90s. And then also just having a guy that could go to if you need him to, or even plug in at spot start if you need him to. I don't know what they envision long-term as his role. He's definitely a guy that could survive as a starter because we saw stretches of it. And even in the big leagues, he had a couple of really good 6-inning outings and I think showed great things. So I think you try him as a starter and continue to see how that works. But I think it's a guy that third time through the lineup, you realize, okay, the slider is his best pitch and trying to make him beat you with the curveball and be ready for the fastball. And I think that's where things can get a little bit difficult. But I think regardless, it's either a really intriguing high leverage arm, a valuable Swiss Army knife, or a solid four starter potentially if he's able to find that command a little bit more.
I'd let him try it as a starter, and I have no idea what the Dre Jameson timeline looks like, and he's obviously going to shrink rotation options because I think Dre Jameson has proven that he can be a starting pitcher. But coming into this year, who are you looking at right now? You're looking at Gallen as the frontline guy. You're looking at Merrill Kelly. You're looking at Ryan Nelson, who took a huge step up. Eduardo Rodriguez. And then I think it really is dependent on, like, is it going to be Dre Jameson or Yilber Diaz? Never mind. Fott. Totally forgot Fott. So I think, hey, maybe try it as a reliever.
Yeah, it's actually, when you went through that, I'm like, wait, they got more arms than I thought. And Jameson, I think, is expected to be ready for spring training time.
I think Jameson can be one of the best, if not the best, swing man in all of baseball. So
exactly, and they need bullpen help. So I agree. Like, if you need him to start, if guys unfortunately go down, like definitely Jober's first man up. But if they need some bullpen arms, like him in the 7th, that stuff might be awesome, up, man.
And you've got an electric factory with that athletic delivery, and then followed by Justin Martinez. Like, dude, gross.
That'll be tough. Number 5. It's Jansel Luis. Infielder, put up a solid season in low A, but this is kind of a projection story here, where I just think he can grow into at least, that average game power eventually, because there's just so much more room in that frame. And I do like the swing. He's, I think, a better defender than a lot of the guys that we've talked about in the infield side of things. But it's a simple setup from both sides of the plate. I think there's almost room to be a little bit more violent at points, because he does kind of start the load late and it can get a little rushed. And this is a dude that I think could hit 20 to 25 home runs as he fills out and grows, and has the ability to potentially stick at shortstop, which helps. But if not, I think he can absolutely play all over the diamond, which helps. Like, he could be a above average second baseman, He's got the arm strength to play third. So I kind of see this infield utility type switch hitter that could grow into more power. And it's very reminiscent of Jurickson Profar. Like that's just the what really stood out to me is that Jurickson Profar type of template, as he hopefully kind of settles in and has all those things come together.
So you view it as almost like if everything goes according to plan, a Mr. Do It All, where it's 55 across the board, tools wise.
Yeah, 50 across the board, and then gets the most out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I am curious because like the numbers do look good. Now, granted, he spent the entire year in Visalia, and I'll admit I didn't watch much Visalia Rawhide baseball this year. I'm sorry.
That's fair. That's fair.
Hand up.
I didn't watch a ton either, but he finished strong to the year. I think he did some things well, and a big part of this is going to be 19 years old, room in the frame. Can he grow into more power? And I think that's going to be the big aspect in that approach coming along too.
Yeah.
Number 4, Tommy Troy. He's really come on in the Arizona Fall League. Of course, first round pick in 2023, but most of his season was wiped out to injury and then just came back and didn't look great. We talked about Troy a lot in the AFL episode, so we don't need to get too deep into it, but I mean, he's a guy that's a great runner. It's going to be second base, but I think has the potential for probably now more average hit tool. I think there was points in college where you're saying, oh, that could be a plus hit tool. There's some swing mechanic things that I think kind of disrupt him, where it's a medium-sized leg kick, but he drops his hands pretty low, like well below his back shoulder. And then I think it kind of causes the barrel to get stuck and wrapped, and it's hard to get it back around. But the other side of things is he does have really quick hands and, is able to just kind of get 2 pitches that are out of the zone, spray them, do things like that. But it does seem like at times those pre-swing moves can make it difficult to stay on secondaries, where the barrel kind of gets pointed. And then, you think about it, you got to whip it back around. It can get in and out of the zone too quickly, and it can kind of leave with that front side a little bit. It's similar to the conversation points we were talking about with like what Corbin Carroll would say, how he got counter rotated too much. Like when he dips that barrel, Tommy Troy does like really, really get counter rotated, where you can almost read his back from the center field camera, and then it's unraveling pretty quickly. So I think on that stuff spinning away from him, it can become a little difficult, and that's kind of why he's swung and missed more. But this is a guy that has average game power, could even tap into a little bit more than that, has flashed barrel accuracy in the hands to get to stuff, has a good approach, and is a plus runner. So it's just kind of a wait and see since, he's been so banged up.
Yeah, I am curious to see what 2025 looks like, because you want closure, and obviously you can assume a lot of things. Like we had this conversation about Zach Veen in Colorado, where Veen, it's like, okay, was he bad or was he hurt? And Troy, I feel like you can ask a similar question, no?
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely.
So 2025 will be, I think that'll be important to look at, because in 19 games, like you would love to see a guy, of Troy's caliber be better than an 850 OPS in the fall league, because he's seeing inferior pitching, like point blank. But at the end of the day, he's only played in high A in professional baseball. So I'll like to see him go through a full healthy offseason, come back in 2025, go to Amarillo, and this guy could very well hit 320 in that environment. Very well.
100%. And I think, the one thing though is that like that move where the hands get so low and deep behind him, and he's rotated, and it's just so far to have to get back around. Yeah. And the fact that he's able to survive with it too is, again, another testament to just a really good athlete and a quick guy. But I think good pitching, they start to blow you up a little bit more. And then again, when you get so far that way and you got to get back around the other way, you're going to pull off of sliders. And, including this AFL stint, he's at 160 against sliders this year. So, I mean, that part, and curveballs aren't much better 140, or it's actually worse. So just breaking balls are going to be a challenge at that point, and it causes him to get in and out of the zone. But he could be a guy that healthy, little adjustment, could be a monster.
Yeah.
Number 3 was a guy that definitely put things together this year, and we've talked about him as well as a newcomer in the top 100, Demetrio Crisantes. Another second base profile here, but man, this dude can hit. He just flat out can hit. 7th round pick. We talked about how he was from like very, very close to the Mexican border. Like it was legitimately like a stone's throw there, and under scouted area. So the D-backs identified a really good player in their backyard who was really developed nicely. And I mean, just turned 20 years old. We talked about the bat to ball. It's a really, really good bat to ball, but then it's also plus plate discipline for his age. He's above average runner, should be a fine defender at second. The floor is just so high with this guy. The ceiling might not be crazy high. It might be 15 home runs, but when you have above average hit plus plate discipline and enough impact, like he hits the ball hard enough, like it could be, if it's 15 home runs, it's more than enough. Can run a little bit, plays a good second. It's a very easy player to feel good about and his chances of being a big leaguer.
Am I wrong in saying this is kind of what you just wanted to hear with Troy?
Yes. Or no, you're not wrong. No, you're not wrong.
You're right. Like this is exactly what Arizona, I feel like, wanted the outcome of Tommy Troy to be. Troy maybe with a little bit more staying power at shortstop, I think. But Crisantes, like, he's exactly what you want. That's a guy that I feel like is going to do the same exact thing, level by level by level. And you might see the OPS drop 15 points on a level by level by level basis. That's okay. He's going to play in a hitter-friendly environment, and he's going to play in a very large outfield. I think that's really important to note with a guy like this, where the slug is going to be better than if he was a Washington National, than if he was a Chicago Cub. Like, it's going to be good because he has a lot of real estate to work with and he can move, man. So he's going to stretch like that single that the center fielder needs to get behind in left center. That's going to be a double for him. So I feel like this guy is perfect for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
100%. And especially with what they have throughout the system here, like this is definitely a guy that's lacking. And, Troy will probably give you a little bit more explosion, a little bit more power upside, sure. But Crisantes, it was 19 years old this year and flashed a 109, and produced some 108s and stuff like that. So you figure he grows into a little bit more. That's more than enough with the bat, the ball that he has. I agree. I think he's going to be a doubles machine with the way that he utilizes the whole field. And he hits the ball in the air pretty consistently, 38% ground ball rate. So spraying it all over the field in the air with enough sneaky pop, the approach, everything he's got going for him, it's a very high floor bat.
Yeah.
Number 2. As you know, is one of my favorite prospects, even though we have not really seen him make his pro debut. Although I was able to dive deeper into video and really just see what he had going on and kind of some instructional games, things like that. And it was really fun to just see how twitchy and talented he is. Slade Caldwell. I think he's going to be maybe not to the same degree, obviously, but I think he has a good chance to be kind of this coming year's Kevin McGonigal, where I don't think he finishes the year in the top 20 or anything like that, but I think can finish the year as a consensus top 100 guy. And it's a lot of the similar things, right? Where smaller in stature, so he slips a little bit because of that. But this guy has crazy bat speed for his size, has a great feel for the strike zone, sprays the ball over the yard, absolutely flies. And the difference with Caldwell is, he might not give you as much offensive, potential as a Kevin McGonigal, but he can play a really good center field. And I think potentially even a plus center field or plus center field, the instincts, the speed, like he is a natural out there. So, I mean, when you have the defensive ability out there, I love his operation in the box. I love how quick the bat is in the swing. It's just a matter of, like, can he get a little flat sometimes? Sure. Can he get it in the air a little more consistently? Other than that, I mean, I have a very high level of confidence in the bat compared to most of these other high school draft guys who we haven't really seen.
He just seems twitchy. Like, I remember that was the thing that, kept on coming up when we were looking at the draft. And it's like high school guys, I'll just read. Cause like, it's hard for me to analyze, swings, especially on like a perfect game showcase level. Like pitching, I feel like it's just easier for me to ingest. But like the word that just kept on coming up with Slade Caldwell was twitchy. Yep. And you mentioned Jet Williams. I was like, okay, I'll ingest Slade Caldwell like Jet Williams. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know that you're very high on that prototype. Like, you're high on that type of person where the plate discipline's good. It's going to get better, and he can really motor, and he has enough impact to make it like a part of his game.
It's funny you say that. I think it's one of the most undervalued archetypes in baseball right now, because we got away from like the throwback player, which the Juan Pierre types I get, but these kids are different, man. Like these are not slap hitters. If you have 40 power with that archetype in the defense, like, you are going to be a monster. And I know, like, McGonigal, he's got 50 power, but even then, like, people are like, oh, well, what are you going to get there? Jet Williams, another guy, like, oh, he's not going to hit 25 home runs. But if that type of player with that speed and defense and the way that they can move and feel for the barrel and approach is, giving you 10 to 15 home runs, going to be quite good. So it is kind of like this hybrid of Jet and McGonigal. Obviously not quite as freaky maybe as some of those guys or those two with the bat, but I think it's not far off. And then he gives you defensive value. So this is a guy that I think should be a top 100 prospect. And I, even when doing this, you notice if he's ahead of Crisantes, that was me saying I made a mistake. I'm going to put him in the top 100 next for 2025. When I was able to get another 20 at bats to look at, he can manipulate the barrel like it'll be up and in. He turns it around. It could be middle away. He's slapping it the other way. Like I just think the twitch being combined with a feel for the barrel just results in a rare ability to hit and a lot of doubles. So I have a lot of confidence in Slade Caldwell. Very sad. It's just never fails. All my favorite guys in terms of prospects are not in Bowman, and he is not in Bowman draft either, unfortunately.
Tough. Do we know who else is in Bowman draft?
No JJ Weatherholt, my other favorite in the class. Okay. And there's one more that's not in there.
They always withhold number 2, right?
Yeah.
Who went 2? Is that Burns that went 2?
I don't think Burns is in there either. I'm not positive though if they withheld 2 this year, but Weatherholt's not in there. I know that. And there's one other top dog that isn't, but you got Bazana, you got Cags, you got Condon. There's a lot of fun bats in there too.
Nice.
Number 1, it's this peak of I'm tired of talking about this guy because just like please graduate, and the only reason why he didn't graduate is health. Jordan Lawlar. D-backs are going to need him this year. Yeah, I don't know exactly where. There's a chance that you could play second short. They're going to move some guys around, and I think they're going to need him to plug in if somebody gets hurt. Like there's going to be a spot and a point in time where Lawlar is going to be needed, but it's just a matter of him being available and healthy. We've talked about him so many times here, where he's one of the fastest guys in baseball. He's 99th percentile sprint speed, and if you look at Baseball Savant, he's an above-average defender at shortstop. He's got great plate discipline, and he can hit you 25 home runs. Like that's a 4-win player if it all comes together. We're just waiting for it to all come together. And the main reason why we haven't been able to see it come together has just been health. It's really that. He's playing out in the Winter League. I don't know what the stats are, but every time I check in, he seems to do something well. So I imagine he's performing pretty well out there. But I'm actually pulled it up just now. 702 OPS. Honestly, not bad for in the Dominican Winter League for a guy that missed the whole year. He played 23 games this year. And 9 of those were at the rookie level. So in his 12 games in AAA, destroyed baseballs. Like we know how good this guy is. It's just availability.
Yeah. Geraldo Perdomo is the estimate on MLB Trade Rumors is $2.1 million. I think this is R1 for Perdomo. Like at what point do you just move Perdomo to make space for Lawlar? Because I understand that you want him playing every day. But like Perdomo, why can't Perdomo be a bench bat for you at $2 million? Like I understand that relegation's not great, but like it seems like that's the better option than having, Blaze Alexander can't play short. Your shortstop option on the bench right now, I just pulled up Fangraphs, is Tim Tawa. Like I'm good. Have Perdomo on the bench and have Lawlar be the shortstop on opening day. We're past the point of like, oh, Perdomo's an all-star. Like he hasn't been good for a year and a half at this point. Yeah. So, I mean, like we have to be okay moving off the Perdomo thing to get a top 20 prospect in the game everyday reps.
And I guess the scary part is like, even though he's not great, Perdomo, he is big league average in terms like he's just going to hold it down. And if Lawlar is not good, then you're really screwed. So, but to your point, like Lawlar can be on the bench and you can find consistent reps for him. Like I think Ketel Marte, to preserve him, should be DHing more games next year, especially with the ankle thing and then just continuing to come up. Those days, Lawlar could play second. Geraldo Perdomo does not need to play every day. So like you could have Lawlar cutting into those reps at shortstop. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can mix and match and do things, but I'm with you. Like if Lawlar has a good spring training or even just like you feel good about where he's at, I wonder if they do start to try to turn things over that way and adjust. And like the D-backs may need to get creative this offseason to address some needs. And trading a Perdomo could be the way to do that, because there's still plenty of teams that I think would value him, given, the light shortstop free agent market, and what Perdomo has at least been able to prove as a solid fill in, just everyday second division guy. So I think if you're trying to win a World Series, you probably want to shoot a little higher. So I'm very interested to see what they do, but it seems like they love Perdomo, dude. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think Perdomo has to be okay with a move to the bench, like a move to a third middle infielder role. Because at this point, Marte's going to get a little banged up. That's who could tell Marte's been for a half decade at this point.
Yes,
I do think Perdomo is better used as an Edmundo Sosa, where he's going to play 90 games, and that's better than him playing 150, because at most he's going to give you, good defense and an 85 WRC plus, a 90 WRC plus. I'd take my chances on Lawlar playing 120 games at short instead.
Yeah, no doubt. And another thing I think they could do is you move Lourdes Gurriel, that frees up some money. And then now you can put Gino Suarez at the DH spot, or you could put Marte at the DH spot more consistently. And then that's where you can, rotate those infielders a little bit more. So I'm fascinated to see what they're going to do, because they're going to be creative. They've made it all but obvious that they're going to, dump Jordan Montgomery. And they have some other things to address. So they still have to address first base. You put Lawlar at first. I'm really interested to just see what they're going to do with that infield, because you do have plenty of athletes around there, but they still need a guy to play first.
Gino at first, right? Gino at first, Perdomo at third.
Could work.
Or Blaze Alexander at third.
Oh, Perdomo at third, or Perdomo at short and Lawlar at third. Lawlar could be an elite third baseman potentially too.
There you go.
Just please find a way to get Lawlar run, because this is an opportunity to have a player that could be very, very dynamic for you.
Still holding out hope that they bring Waldschmidt back. I know you predicted that as well too.
I agree, and I think it makes all the sense in the world. So I hope they do that. That'll do it for this episode. We will continue to be doing farm systems every single week, whether it's updating one or putting out a new write-up on the few that we have left. But of course, it's been a long time since we've done some others. So kind of circling back and updating those is something that we're going to continue to do.
Yeah.
As always, we really appreciate you listening to the show. We have a couple really awesome interviews for Monday: Carson Williams and Tamar Johnson, both of which are playing in the Premier 12 tournament for Team USA. They were so much fun to talk to.
Yeah.
Such awesome insight. Really enjoyed picking their brains about their journey and everything like that, and especially talking to Carson about the Southern League. So I think you guys will enjoy that episode very much on Monday or Tuesday. And we got a lot more interviews and stuff on the way as well. We're getting close to Rule 5 time too, but we got to wait for those teams to make their decisions. That'll be fun. But as always, thank you for listening. Look forward to talking prospects with you next week. Have a great weekend.